The United States has refused Putin's offer to operate a radar station in Azerbaijan jointly with the U.S. The U.S. plans to install interceptor missiles in Poland and a radar base in the Czech Republic to counteract Russia's nuclear deterrent. Russian ruler Vladimir Putin has threatened to target nuclear missiles at Europe if the U.S. goes ahead with the plan.
Aimed at a target the size of London, here's what would happen. The blast wave would obliterate everything that circled 30 miles wide. The fireball would be 110 miles across, incinerating everything in its path.
The move is sure to increase tensions. U.S. analysts have confirmed that Russia is duplicating U.S. development of a hypersonic cruise missile, which can orbit the Earth and re-enter the atmosphere suddenly, launching devastating attacks anywhere without warning. In response to the belligerence of the Bush administration, Russia has placed hundreds of nuclear missiles pointed at the United States. U.S. systems allow 3 minutes for human judgment after computers warn of a missile attack, reported to be a daily occurrence. And then comes a 30-second presidential briefing. Pentagon analysts have found serious design flaws in computer security systems, which could allow terrorist hackers to break in and simulate a launch. Russian systems are far less reliable. U.S. and Russian military plans are likely to have a ripple effect through China, India, Pakistan, and other nuclear states. A study of a randomly selected one-week period between March the 3rd and the 9th revealed that none of the 657 U.S. British airstrikes in Iraq and Afghanistan disclosed by the U.S. Air Force were reported by the U.S. media. The United States conducts an average of 75 to 100 airstrikes in the two countries every day. The Johns Hopkins study released in July 2006 revealed that 655,000 Iraqis had been killed due to the invasion. Most of the known violent deaths were committed by the United States, according to the study. The Iraqi Foreign Ministry on Saturday issued a formal protest to Turkey over cross-border shelling into northern Iraq directed at long-repressed Kurds. Since the U.S. authorized the incursion and supports Turkey's attempts to squash Kurdish independence, the protest has fallen on deaf ears, and Turkey's escalating war of aggression has not been condemned by the United Nations, unlike when official enemies of the United States commit crimes. The 250,000 troops Turkey has amassed at the border may invade northern Iraq within the next couple of days. In Turkey, Kurds make up about 20% of the population of more than 70 million. In the 90s, with U.S. arms, Turkey killed 40,000 Kurds. Kurds are seeking autonomy for southeastern Turkey, where they make up much of the population. The U.S. is now policing Iraq and fighting the anti-occupation resistance with people it formerly labeled as insurgents and terrorists. Among them are dozens of Sunni militiamen who call themselves the Baghdad Patriots. Americans have granted these gunmen the power of arrest, allowed the Iraqi army to supply them with ammunition, and allegedly fought alongside them in chaotic street battles. U.S. military officials in Iraq have stated that in the upcoming years they plan an occupation of Iraq that neither maintains current troop levels nor leads to a complete pullout, but aims for a smaller long-term force that would remain in the country for years. This goal, drawn from recent interviews with more than 20 U.S. military officers and other officials here, including senior commanders, strategists, and analysts, remains in the early planning stages. The plan could ensure Iraq's client status as well as U.S. control of Iraqi oil in the foreseeable future. Soon after the State Department awarded the Iraq Embassy contract to First Kuwaiti in July 2005, thousands of low-paid migrant workers recruited from South Asia, the Philippines, and other nations poured into Baghdad to begin building their gargantuan new embassy within 2 years' time. When completed later this summer, it will be the most fortified U.S. mission ever constructed, spanning 104 acres on the banks of the ancient Tigris River and holding more than 20 buildings. It will be comparable in size to the Vatican. The three-day Group of Eight summit held in the Baltic seaside resort ended with two vague, non-binding promises, some made for Africa, and negotiations toward a watered-down post-Kyoto Protocol international agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and failures in numerous other items on the agenda. This G8 failure in Helgendam to pass its self-imposed test of credibility will certainly mark the future of its summits. The leaders of the G8 countries, Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, and the United States, said their farewells without an agreement on international trade negotiations or on eliminating subsidies for agriculture in the industrialized world, a move that would give development a boost in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. No agreement was reached either on a new regulation of the highly speculative and therefore risky hedge funds, nor on the political status of the Serbian province of Kosovo. At the same time, the only accords the G8 leaders reached in Helgendam on a medium-term reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and new aid for Africa are considered as weak compromises, tailored only to avoid the impression that the summit was a total failure. On Friday, the G8 leaders agreed to allocate 60 billion US dollars over the coming years to finance the fight against AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and a further $500 million for the Education for All program in Africa. But development and aid experts consider this new pledge as a step backwards compared to the promises made by the G8 at the 2005 summit in Gleneagles, Scotland, to double development assistance by 2010. The Gleneagles deal would mean an annual increase of aid levels by $50 billion starting in 2006. Millions of people around the world protested the summit. A new map of the West Bank, 40 years after its conquest by Israel in the Six-Day War, gives the most definite picture so far of a territory in which 2.5 million Palestinians are confined to dozens of enclaves separated by Israeli roads, settlements, fences, and military zones. Produced by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, it is based on extensive monitoring in the field combined with analysis of satellite imagery. It provides an overall picture officials say is even more comprehensive than charts drawn up by the Israeli military. The impact of Israeli civilian and military infrastructure is to render 40% of the territory, which is roughly the size of the U.S. state of Delaware or the English county of Norfolk, off limits to Palestinians. The rest of the territory, including main centers such as Nablus and Jericho, is split into isolated spots. Movement between them is restricted by 450 roadblocks and 70 manned checkpoints. The UN mapmakers focused on land set aside for Jewish settlements, roads reserved for settler access, the West Bank Wall, closed military areas, and nature reserves. What remains is an area of habitation remarkably close to territory set aside for the Palestinian population, and Israeli proposals dating back to the aftermath of Israel's War of Conquest in 1967.